All right, so this is the presentation on the Dutch Golden Age. Make sure you're taking notes on this. There are a lot of paintings in this. I'm probably going to skip through them pretty quickly so that you can get your notes done rather fast, and then we can move on to the next section. So the Golden Dutch Age is between the 1580s and about the 1670s. Know that the Netherlands is also known as part of the Low Countries. All right, it's the Netherlands as well as Belgium. You can see here that there's a lot of water, and the Dutch become well known as people that can actually reclaim a lot of this land from the water. So we'll see throughout their history is that they reclaim a lot of this blue territory that is below sea level. And they take that back in order to establish more land for their territory. So the 17th century is known as the Dutch century. Okay, and there's lots of different things that work for the Dutch at this time. First, their political model, the fact that the Dutch had a reformed faith. There's quite a bit of religious toleration. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The Dutch themselves were mostly Calvinists, but they were tolerant of every kind of religion, even Jews who found a safe home in the Netherlands during this time, which was not normal across most of Europe. They had a stable, thriving economy, and this golden age is a golden age of artists and thinkers. Religion and everyday life were recurring themes in this art. Okay, so Dutch society centers around the capitals of Amsterdam and Rotterdam. These places had enough grain supplied to last a year. So if there was a drought or a famine, they would still be able to supply their societies with food. Generally, they had higher salaries than any other parts of Western Europe. Even women had higher wages. Also, they had this Protestant work ethic, this idea of thrift and frugality. We need to save our money for a rainy day. And so during the 17th century, the Dutch had the highest standard of living in Europe. So here are some paintings of Dutch society. You can see the wealth of the buildings, the inside of one of the Protestant churches, the inside of one of the synagogues where Jews were able to worship. Rembrandt is definitely an artist that you should know from this period of the Dutch Golden Ages. He was very good at painting with light and dark colors, but definitely a name you need to know. Okay. So these are just paintings of standard life at this time. In Amsterdam, also during this time, they developed a lot of different architecture where people lived in pretty fabulous homes. You can see the homes along the canal here, and then people living pretty wealthy. Jan van Meer is another name that you should know at this time. He was very famous for painting common societal things, and this is probably his most famous painting, The Girl with the Pearl Earring. So the Dutch economy, they were masters of the export. They exported diamonds, linens, pottery, and these are things that they made in their country. There's not much inflation going at this time, and the Dutch land reclamation project, which we talked about a little bit before, accelerated during this time. So remember that map with all the blue territory that was reclaimed from the sea. And they become the masters of the carrying trade. So they have the lowest shipping rates in Europe because they have the largest fleet of ships. So this map, you can kind of see where they're taking over. They had territory in the Guyanas and in Curacao in the Netherlands Antilles of the Americas. But their biggest trade came from Asia, East Asia specifically, and what was known as the Spice Islands, Indonesia, also Sri Lanka, where they got cloves and cinnamon. But you can take a look at this map and see what other spices they were getting from around the world. And then all this goods would come back and be traded from Amsterdam. So Amsterdam became a center for trade and commerce in the European world. The Dutch East India Company ruled most of that territory over in Indonesia, and they brought great wealth to the people of Amsterdam. So here's some pictures. Please notice the dress of these people. This is kind of Puritan, the Calvinist, very somber, dark colors. Remember that the Calvinists are all about having no fun, so we don't want to have a lot of colors. These paintings obviously show the lace making that was so famous from Amsterdam. They were also known for keeping good books and being frugal with their money. The Dutch Delftware, the pottery you can see here, was also a famous export from the Dutch. The Dutch East India Company, as we said before, controlled the Spice Islands down in Indonesia. And they also explored Africa a little bit too and had interactions with the Japanese. The Netherland Antilles, which I pointed out earlier, this is in the Caribbean Sea. This is where they got a majority of their tobacco and sugar. And you can see here that the Delftware here has the tobacco. In addition to that, they also settled parts of New York. Actually, New York City itself was originally settled by the Dutch, which was called New Amsterdam. It was settled in 1624, and they actually took this symbol, and this is the symbol that the New York state flag actually uses today. You can see a little bit of their heritage from the 20th century Dutch revival buildings in New York City. Eventually, the British come and take the New York, the Manhattan Island away from them. So Dutch intellectual life at this time was centered around the University of Leiden in 1575. By 1645, it was the largest university in the Protestant world. There's a strong separation of the provinces, hindered the power of any church to control intellectual life in the Dutch Republic. So they were really free to study any topics that they wanted to. Also, the University of Groningen, along with Leiden, was one of the first international universities, and half the students were foreign. So a lot of people actually flocked to the Netherlands in order to receive an education. One of those people was René Descartes, who's a French philosopher who lived in Leiden from 1628 to 1649. We'll learn more about him during the Enlightenment, but he was trained there. Dutch optics were well known at this time. Most people agree that the first telescope was invented by Hans Lippershey in 1608. And then Christian Huygens is an astronomical pioneer. He had an explanation for Saturn's rings as well as wave theory of light. Anton van Leeuwenhoek is very famous for his microscope that he refined in the discovery of microorganisms. So here's a picture from Rembrandt of some of the anatomy lessons that they were doing at the time. We're going to go ahead and skip that. But another famous painting by Jan van Meer is called The Astronomer. Here you can see him on the right-hand side. Remember, these paintings during the Dutch Golden Age are trying to show real life, and realism is a really important part of this. So Dutch politics, different than a lot of the other worlds. So you can see Philip II consolidated Habsburg land at the end of the 16th century. So that's all these orange territories here in Italy, Spain, as well as the Netherlands, while the Austrian Habsburgs ruled this territory around Austria. Here's the United Provinces of the Netherlands. It wasn't recognized by Spanish rule until 1581 when they declared their independence. So this was the Netherlands in 1609. Remember that this territory that's going to become Belgium eventually is still ruled by the Spanish. Anyway, the politics are ruled this way. There was regents at the provincial level, so this is kind of broken up into states, if you can think of it that way. And they held virtually all the power. They were strong advocates for local independence. That led to the stadtholder. Now this was kind of, I guess you could consider him a king, but at the same time, the Dutch were a republic more than anything else. So the States General representative from each province went to the stadtholder, and they're responsible for the defense and order of the country. And then the States General, it was the Federal Assembly, it was foreign affairs, war, and all issues had to be referred to local estates. So this was a very, based on a republic where people had autonomy over their own territory. So once again, some realism, The Night's Watch by Rembrandt, the Dutch Royal Palace, Count William II granting privilege. Then you did have some wars between the Dutch and the English, and this was more over the sea than anything. And then eventually this ends when King William III and Queen Mary II ascend the English throne in 1689 after the Glorious Revolution, which you'll learn about in the next video.